please let me hand over to Jay, and we'll hear your presentation, which I think is on Stuart Hall.
Okay, I'm going to talk about Stuart Hall, along with how I apply his theoretical lens in my research, my doctoral research, as well as the current research. I'm a visiting researcher at the Education and Research Department. And let's start with his biography, short biography, as described by Louis Gate Jr. from Harvard University in his lecture book, Race, Ethnicity, and Nation, which Stuart Hall delivered to point lecture in 1994 around in Harvard University. Stuart Hall is a professor of sociology and head of sociology department at Open University in England, which joined in 1979. And he immigrated from his native Jamaica to England in 1951 to take up studies at Rhodes Scholar at Martin College at University of Oxford, where he read English literature. And he is, as Robert Gates Jr. described, Henry Louis Gates Jr. mentioned, he is the founding father, along with Richard Halkett and Raymond Williams, of the field of culture studies, which he launched as the founding editor of the New Left Review in 1960. So he has a Marxist tradition, coming from Marxist background, along with other two Marxist scholars. They founded the culture studies, which was not very famous in those days for Marxist scholars. But he initiated that study fields of culture studies and founded also the New Left Review, which is still currently is published monthly, I think. And beginning in 1964, he became a member of the Center of Contemporary Culture Studies at the University of Birmingham, and he became an acting director in 1968 and then director in 1972. He passed away in 2014. So that's the very rough sketch as described by Henry Louis Gates Jr. So before going to there, I would also like to intertwine with my history, my background, how I found him out, and connected histories with his work and himself, and my trajectory of life in studies. So before that, we can see the connected histories between these geographical areas: Jamaica, United Kingdom. I was born and brought up in Burma, Myanmar, and I studied my PhD studies in the United States and at the University of Wisconsin Madison, and at present I'm in the UK. So these geographical configuration has connected histories as the Aboriginal people and Australian nation has connection. So the whole world has been under the European colonization, and out of that, the racialization and race, white, black, and other colonizer and colonized, these categories became master categories throughout the history. And the themes is that Jamaica and my country, Burma, has the post-colonial background, and we all are. For Stuart Hall was also in United Kingdom. I was also in United States, which was currently supposed to be the empire, and former emperor, United Kingdom. So individually related, in relation to individuals under the structure of colonialization history and the post-colonization history, post-colonial presence. I found him in my doctoral studies at the University of Wisconsin Madison. For the present events, then you could say the contemporary events. So there has been authoritarian rule by Trump, which I could translate his days and his ruling through Stuart Hall's understanding of authoritarian populism in United Kingdom, as it's described in his works about British politics. So that was one way. That was in general picture of connection and how I could identify him through the past and the present. how about my work? So this is the quote from his book, his lecture, Fateful Triangle, which I have already mentioned, 2-boy lecture in 1994 at Harvard University. And he described that about difference throughout these history and current contemporary things about racialization and post-colonization, post-coloniality in current terms. He said difference and racialization in this way. As I have argued, he put in a brief account of his argument. The production of the West others was inaugurated with the onset of the Europe imperial adventure, which makes it conterminous with modernity, and which I suggested shifted after the Enlightenment from the marking of differences between different human species to the marking of difference within one continuous human spectrum, in relation to which race provided the trope for the fundamental polarization of human societies, with their various gradations and variations into civilization and barbarism. So his conceptualization of past and present of racialization through colonization and post-coloniality. Through the colonization history, European people differentiate themselves from the people they encountered in different regions through colonization in terms of human species. They ask the questions whether these people they encountered in Latin America, in American continent, are they human species? And they differentiated that they are not human according to religion first, then according to science. In that case, in the latter case, after the Enlightenment, as mentioned, these others became differentiated with scientific ways and hierarchical organized, put in the marginalized and subordinated position. That is his point. So there will be a lot of degradation as well as gradations and variations of categorizations and differentiations of others from the dominant position of European eyes. That is main result differences throughout this history. And currently, that scientific racialization is translated again in cultural and sociological and civilizational ways in terms of they are more civilized, they are less civilized, we are more civilized, we are less civilized, and they are barbarism, we have no barbarism like that. So this is the presence of racialization out of the history. So out of that idea of difference, I constructed research questions in my study of education, how identities of middle school students from Burmese diasporic refugee background constructed out of school in US education, and how are differences of these students produced and institutionalized from identities constructed through language and literacy practice. Intersection of differences and language and literacy practice in school, centering on these Burmese diasporic people, community, students from that community. And how do these differences, identities, affect the students' academic learning? These are my main research questions, informed by his theoretical concept, my past project. And the current project, I have this research question. How do international students in higher education interpret their educational life experience from their diasporic positionalities? Again, Stuart Hall informed me about diasporic positionalities. Having been prepared by the colonial education, I knew England from the inside, but I'm not and never will be English. I know both places intimately, but I'm not wholly of either place. That is diasporic position. As he saw through colonization and racialization from both ends in his theorization of race and ethnicity in nation, from the European ends as well as from the colonized ends. So that's from his position he could produce that theory. And that's exactly the diasporic experience, far away enough to experience the sense of exile and loss, close enough to understand the enigma of always postponed arrival. So out of that concept, what I'm now looking at my data of interviewing international students from my country in higher education in the United Kingdom and US is that, how they see themselves through the knowledge studies in higher education from diasporic positions. A diasporic position is not in the vacuum. It's related to the things they study with and they encountered with in the higher education life, what they do study for and what they studied about is related to diasporic positions. For example, in Stuart Hall's life, because of his Marxist studies and cultural studies, these diasporic understanding coagulate in producing the theoretization of visualization in coloniality and post-coloniality. So that's how his life, the history, and in all our connected histories, how I found him and I used the theories in my past project and the current project. I think I've been used 10 minutes time.
Thank you.
So you can go to the collection of his work from Duke University Press here.
Thank you very much.